Welcome to We the People. I'm Erin Goebel-Lynch. Before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. For everybody who sent in comments, messages, emails, and even texted me directly, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for your feedback. Hopefully we fixed some of the sound issues you guys were hearing. Also, to the woman on Facebook who commented with several angry emojis and declared that our show is BS, I appreciate you too. If you thought us calling out systemic racism was bullshit, I hope you're listening today. So, let's get into it. A couple of weeks ago, I was reading an article in the Dallas Morning News about how Texas rates with respect to LGBTQ friendliness, and a memory came to me. I remember I was sitting in the office of one of my undergraduate professors discussing the civil rights movement, past, present, and future. Barack Obama was in the White House, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was just repealed. The Supreme Court hadn't yet ruled in favor of marriage equality, but that change too felt imminent. Our country had come such a long way since Stonewall, since Reagan and Bush had actively ignored the AIDS epidemic ravaging the gay community, since the murder of Matthew Shepard, among so many others. As we sat there discussing the future of the civil rights movement, I remember thinking aloud, what's next? Naively, foolishly, I remember thinking that we as a country were close to accomplishing civil rights for the LGBTQ community. My professor didn't challenge or correct that notion. I think she too wanted to believe that was the case. That belief for me was shattered on November 8th, 2016. The tide has gone out again. Under the current administration, we're bearing witness to the rolling back of civil rights for multiple groups in this country. Today, we're here to discuss the effects of this resurgence of discriminatory practices and policies within the LGBTQ community in the age of Trump. I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves. Take it away.
I'm Shine. I am a trans masculine person of color. I actually just moved down here from Chicago, so this is like a semi-culture shock kind of thing.
I bet.
So.
My name is Whitney Roach. I am a queer woman. I am cis, and I use she, her pronouns.
My name is Hayden Dubois. I identify as a transgender male, also a bisexual individual.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Let's get into it. So the first thing I want to talk about just really quickly is the importance of language. You guys all identified yourselves, you used your pronouns, you did all that. Why does that matter for especially the heterosexual kind of cisgender community to pay attention to? Why should people care about language?
I think normalizing it.
Yeah.
Whenever you, as a transgender individual, because that's what I can speak to, when you have to correct someone on your pronouns, you are instantly putting a target on yourself. You're jeopardizing your safety in that situation, and it's calling attention to the fact that you don't fit in that binary. And it's more than anything, it's a safety issue. So whenever we as a queer community, and I use the word queer as an all-encompassing, whenever we as a queer community choose to put our pronouns out without question, without prompt, we're trying to normalize the situation so that the cis heteronormative community recognizes like this is an important thing. Language matters, and how people identify and how you address them is just a basic matter of respect.
For me, I think our language has historically been incredibly privileged, incredibly heteropatriarchal and systemically white, right? So even as a white person, as a cis person, I think acknowledging my privilege requires me to acknowledge language as well. And just because we have historically not included language that was inclusive does not necessarily mean we can't. So one example for me is the way people feel very inclusive just writing he, she to be like, oh, now we're including women, with the assumption that it stops there. Or assumptions in science that everybody is going to fall under the white category of race, right? And these limited ideas of white men being the only people that anything is going to affect. So limiting sex and gender and race there as well. So I think putting it out there, especially as a person of privilege, at least clears some space so that people with less privilege feel more comfortable.
Yeah, I definitely agree as someone as a person of color identifying as a man that my pronouns definitely do take my safety away, but it also gives me a presence. It allows people to know that I am here and you cannot overlook me, and that's a big deal in the community and the community for people of color, is that we're often overlooked for a lot of different reasons. So to be able to present myself as who I am, and to let them know, like, no, don't look over that. That's not to be excused or a slip up. But you know, a simple apology is fine. But to be able to just say it with pride definitely gives me as a person in the community, as a person of color, like my own identity, and I don't feel like shadowed.
Mm-hmm. And when I have sat in on, like, in my life as an academic, we would start meetings by like kind of introducing ourselves, and everyone would do pronouns. I don't see that in my current job, but is that the sort of thing that the LGBTQ community would appreciate, like, happening more often? Is that, I mean, because I feel like a lot of people, especially the first time they do it, they're like, this is so awkward, I don't want to do it. But what do you guys think? Is that something that we should, for our part in being allies, should we just be doing that on the regular, part of our email signatures, part of whatever?
Absolutely. So I'm going to go with something as simple as name preference, right? So somebody's name is Megan. They prefer to be called Meg, right? That's a respect we give people. Just because you happen to see a document or something else, or you read them as differently, it's the same respect. And I think even if you assume or make the assumption that everyone in this space is going to be comfortable with their pronouns, or everyone's going to be read in a certain way, I myself, even in queer settings, don't necessarily always know people's preferred pronouns, and I've made mistakes before, and it would be much more easier for myself, a lot more comfortable for myself, just to get it out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
The same way people introduce themselves with names. It's just courtesy.
Cool. All right, so let's get into the politics stuff. So I think, like me, a lot of liberals were surprised by the election of Donald Trump. I think it took a lot of people by surprise. I think a lot of people just didn't see it actually happening. I'm wondering, what does the level of surprise that we had tell you guys specifically about the heterosexual cisgender voters on the left, and how they understand the political context of being queer in America, that we were so surprised that that could happen? We've heard a lot of commentary from members of the Black community, for example, like, really, were you that surprised? I'm wondering, did you guys have the same kind of feeling? And just
I did. I was heartbroken. I think it was without a doubt one of the hardest days of my life.
Yeah.
Especially to see family members and people who claim to support my community and love and accept me vote for someone who outright thinks that I shouldn't exist, that we should be rounded up in concentration camps. And I mean, here we are. The queer community isn't far behind the community of immigrants. It was a slap in the face, because I think the cis heteronormative community thought, well, they have gay marriage, they're set. They didn't take into consideration, I can't go to just any doctor. I can be denied, life-saving healthcare. I'm shot, the doctor doesn't believe in who I am, I'm left laying in the street dying. Like, that's legal, that's their rights. That's where we're at in our country. It's extremely difficult for me to find healthcare. Even when I do find healthcare, I'm often dismissed or overlooked. In the past year, I've been to the ER twice for a trans-related health need, and my pain was dismissed, and I was told to take ibuprofen. So I think it was a lot of the community outside of us being like, oh, but y'all like gay marriage. Well, we also have trans women of color being slaughtered every day, every single day. And I think it was a little naive on their part.
I think as I was just the same way, like, you guys are surprised, it's a shock to you guys. Considering the fact that I'm overlooked in so many different ways, just to know that the United States is so blinded by this like 50s mentality that it's picket fences and nice, manicured lawns, and there are no problems. And yes, give them the scraps of same-sex marriage. Give them the scraps of, you can have this kind of basic line of healthcare, and you'd be lucky if someone looks at you and doesn't put you out because you are trans-identifying. And so no, I wasn't surprised at all to know that this is what the country would prefer. They don't want to deal with that. They would rather it just go away. So anything to make it go away that's cool with them. And it's not a shock to know that there are people still picketing for this. Like, the racial thing is always a fine line for me, because I don't present Black, but I am Black. My mother's African American, and I've watched her go through things that is a shock. And I know that if a white person went through that, it's like, no, that's never a thing that would happen. And then I get the same treatment. It's, you don't look very black, so you're passable. Oh, but you have ethnic features, so I don't know. We have to put you under the microscope. Oh, now you identify as a man. Oh, all the problems, all the bells and whistles goes off. And once that happens, then it's like, okay, we can bring out the disrespect because you are not a real person in this country. We don't see you as a living, breathing thing. We just treat you like a statistic, a money-making thing. That's it. Like, it literally isn't a shock, especially if America's just all about the money, all about the politics, all about the bottom line. No, not a surprise at all.
I'm obnoxiously optimistic. It is my worst quality. So I was surprised. But I think that surprise came with a lot of hurt. I was so surprised that our country hates me this much. I was so surprised that my friends were comfortably posting all over their Instagram and Facebook that they voted for somebody who despises me. So I don't know if the surprise was so much at our nation at large, but at the willingness for people's phobias and hates and anger to be so publicly displayed proudly. I really thought we had moved past a point where at least if you were this ignorant person, you knew that you couldn't say it. Mm-hmm. And that was, we were treading water there, at least but we've opened floodgates to a point where there is so much more grouping and polarized divide where people who are anti-queer essentially feel strength and feel validated that our commander-in-chief is on their side.
How do you come to terms with people or the ideas that people have about, one of the justifications we hear from people who voted for Trump, who voted for candidates on the right is, like, I don't hate you. I don't hate black people. I don't hate the queer community. I don't hate anything. This is about my religious beliefs. This is about the economy. This is about anything else other than all the policies that he is enacting in his party. Right.
It's clearly not about economics because he's a failed businessman. He fails every test we've given him in that arena. I think the election of Donald Trump it comes down to one simple thing, because we saw gay white men vote for him. We saw white lesbians vote for him. We saw white women vote for him. And it came down to white people protecting white privilege over all other identifiers. That's the only justification I can see for a white woman voting for a man who says, I'll grab her by the pussy, who openly rapes women and laughs about it. That's the only justification, is their number one priority is protecting white privilege.
Absolutely.
Literally, I've never seen more excuses be given to one individual based on his color. Like, every excuse known to man given to this white man just because he's white. Like, that blows my mind that he can just say and do and exist, and it's like, oh, it's okay, he can be in office, yeah, he can control this, because I'd rather have him be here than a woman be here. And I know if a woman's here, she's just gonna let everybody have every right on the planet, and we can't have that. We cannot have that. Our white privilege cannot be attacked by a woman that's going to see equality across the board forever. No. We cannot allow that. So I would rather vote in a celebrity, failed businessman to dictate my life and how I live and breathe and operate. Yeah, we're gonna just do that. That makes so much sense on politics, and the president and his color literally are all in one big giant box of...
I'm going to say that really old, probably overly used, the political is personal, right? I don't think that you any longer have the right to say this is all politics, it's nothing personal. No, you're literally stripping rights from me, from my friends, from people I know, from your own family. And religion as a guise for hate. We've used religion as an endorsement for enslavement. We've used religion as an endorsement for limited women's rights and women's votes, and now we're using it as an endorsement for anti-LGBTQ rhetoric. I mean, how many hundreds of years do we have to see that religion is being used as this overlying hate tool instead of an encompassing, loving entity?
On that subject, just curious, do any of you come from religious backgrounds?
Absolutely.
How does that impact? I was thinking about, because you guys were bringing up race and other things, this question of intersectionality and how your religious views might fold into that.
For me personally, it was a very long, difficult, and painful road. When I came out as a teenager as a lesbian, I was still female presenting. I was in a church that thought physical abuse was the best way to handle that situation. And so I went from being a kid who grew up in the church 3 days a week to turning my back on it and never looking again. It took probably a decade of life and finding people who displayed just that type of love. Whitney explained that like the true God is a God of all encompassing, all loving, no excuses, no expectations, open arms, and that's the end of the conversation. Finding that God on my own and realizing that God is not flawed, the people are flawed, and the institution of religion is flawed, and the churches are flawed. And it took being able to separate those things for me to make amends with my faith and come back to Christ, but accept Christ and accept God's love, but deny the hate and the bigotry of his people and the hypocrisy of his people.
So because of that, do you attend any sort of church?
No, ma'am, I don't. I believe that I don't necessarily need a minister or pastor to walk me through my walk with Christ. I invest very heavily and deeply in that relationship. I also invest heavily in understanding other religions and other belief systems, and I take the best of each one. And I just have to believe that, like, at the end of my life, that I've loved people and I've loved them in the way that I think Christ would have loved them.
Definitely. I came from a Southern Baptist Christian household where when you go to church, the pastor's looking directly at you and telling you if you're gay, you're going to hell. If you're sinning, you're going to hell. Bottom line, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And growing up in a church, and my godfather's actually a pastor, so living like in the forefront of a church and being right there in the center and trying to listen to God's word, supposedly God's word, and listen to everyone in the church tell you this: if you don't walk this walk of life, you're going to go to hell immediately. But then turning around and seeing the hypocrisy of the church, of all the cheating men, all of the men under the law having sex with other men and bringing that home and ruining household. So how can I follow that fine line of, if I'm doing this, living my life, not doing anything to hurt anyone, and I'm going to go to hell, but these people are all so righteous under the light of God, but you're doing so many things that literally are in the Bible that will tell you will go to hell. So growing up like that, I just stopped going completely to church. I just stopped being involved in church stuff because I feel like I can't be involved in such hypocritical thinking in such a small-minded community, and I'm not going to hell because clearly I haven't died yet. And I'm not going to be stricken down by some great devil coming, like that whole inferno thing. You will grow up living your life like that and live in this turmoil of just unhappiness and misery. And I didn't want to do that. A lot of people I knew I went to church with were gay or were trans, and they just couldn't come out, and they stuck it through. Like, they're living lies, and I see it every day, and I just cannot be a part of that. And that is like the church structure, and I just stray away from that. So spirituality is my best bet in that, because I can't pray to a deity that doesn't exist in my mind. I can only know what vibes I get from the universe, what feelings I get, how my prayer and belief work. But sitting in the church and listening to the lies from a book, I can't be a part of that.
Whitney, what about you?
Religion's a difficult one for me. I was born into the Church of Scientology, and my parents were divorced very early on, and my mother left the church. And part of their divorce decree was that I was to not have religion since they couldn't agree. So I willingly found an after-school program in elementary school and went in and learned Bible verses because they gave you cookies. It was really great. And got kicked out of that church very early because I was too bossy. I was like 11. I was like, well, that's really not very nice. And when I came out, really, religion, my queerness, I came out at 14, was nothing. I brought my girlfriend home, staying for dinner. So I was really surprised, actually, as an adult later on, to realize how much people hated us. Like, I was just so blown away. I lost a few friends, but we were 14. You know, I mean, what is that? I'm always so surprised that people innately want you dead or not existing, right? So the idea of religion setting policy and setting rules, I go back to the idea of it as a guise for people's hate. I could validate anything I want if I hold this book and tell you it's wrong. But, you know, not too far off the subject, I'm going to go like Chick-fil-A, right? Like, you know, if this was a system that was using religion to say, oh, we no longer think, I don't know, whatever. Or if we were going to go, if we were funding KKK policies, you know, we really think that we should fund more of these, or we should be more segregationist, or we think women shouldn't have the right to vote, so we're going to put all our money there. It's not you. Women and people of color can still come in and give us money. We'll be nice to you. But the profit's going to go over here. It's that same argument, right? So religion for me personally, coming out, identifying with myself, I'm spiritual, I believe in a higher power, I believe in God. I've gone to several affirming churches, but with my family makeup now between my spouse, who was very religious growing up, and my 2 children who are both of color and young, I want an inclusive, affirming church with a large population of colored people with a good child center. That's a lot to find. So no, I don't have a church right now.
Yeah. So you mentioned Chick-fil-A. I love the idea of, you know, boycotting, voting with your dollar, all of that. In Texas, that's complicated. Weirdly complicated with Chick-fil-A because people love it so much. Just as a quick tangent, what do you guys think about actually, like, do you not go to Chick-fil-A? Do you advocate for not going to them? And then are there other companies or groups that you boycott because of their political views?
I just boycotted Wrangler yesterday.
Yeah, why?
I don't own any Wrangler, by the way.
I don't feel like you're
I
Wrangler
really
type of
wanted to
place.
so I could boycott them. They just fired Little Nas X, for coming out as gay. They had an endorsement with him because of his cowboy song, right? And they were like, he doesn't fit our Christian beliefs, so we've broken his contract.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, so I boycott Wrangler now. Yeah, I'm not a Chick-fil-A person. I was for years. I love it. Great customer service, super clean. My kids could play. We get weird looks, but you know, whatever. We went in once as a family, and a very nice, I'm assuming, queer young man behind the counter told us that he loved our family, and we gave him hope for his future as an adult. But I just can't. Every waffle fry is like 5 cents towards electroshock therapy for a 14-year-old somewhere.
Yeah.
I definitely vote with my dollar. I don't go to Chick-fil-A, but probably because I don't eat chicken more than anything. But I did stop going there whenever like that really came to light. 5 or 6 years ago? It's been a minute. But like Wayfair just recently, we actually furnished half our house from Wayfair, and the day they came out about their situation, we canceled the orders we had pending.
No.
Do you want to give some context for people who don't know what's going on?
So they were they had a contract with the contractors for quote unquote furnishing as much as you can furnish a concentration camp. We're furnishing the detention centers, and they refused to break that contract. Wayfair workers, what was it, in New York? I forget the city, walked out on their jobs last week or the week before in solidarity with breaking that contract. They still refused to do so. They said they do not discriminate against any of their contracts. Take that with a grain of salt. So we canceled our orders right then and there for purchases we had pending. I think in a society that nothing is more holy than the dollar, that's the vote you have, and you have to use it, and you have to use it wisely. So we choose to vet charities where we give our money. We make sure that when we donate items, we're donating them to places that don't discriminate. Like Salvation Army has never and will never get anything from my life. I give to Berry Goodbyes, and I give to them consistently. What they do is phenomenal to help women in their situations. I personally, when it comes to Pride Month, I don't buy into the major corporations who put up a pride flag for 30 days. But I do still give to local places, like down at Oak Lawn, out of the closet, places like that, that take care of our community year round, not just when it boosts their profits.
Yeah, same. I definitely vote with my dollar, and it's not even just about like color issues and stuff like that. Like I haven't shopped at H&M in years since the whole artist lawsuit happened. One of the designers just used a graffiti artist's mural on a shirt, and no contract, no ask, no permission, no nothing, and just took credit for it, and that's that. So anybody affiliated with H&M, any of that, like Pride Month stuff, no, I won't do it, because as an artist, that's so disrespectful. You're stealing, and you don't care, and you just rather would make $1, $10, $20 off a tank top, instead of going through the channels to find this artist and say, hey, I love your work. Would you mind if we borrowed this? And here's a little compensation because we appreciate what you did, because it's amazing and it's going to make us a ton of money. Like, I can't deal with anything that just disrespects you as a person, your beliefs, what you do, how you live. And no, I've never even stepped foot in a Chick-fil-A, and I won't. I can't get with any company that decides that they'll use their power to manipulate and just sway people's thought processes and how they spend and how they live and how they move. I won't support that.
Yeah, my husband and I were just talking this weekend about, like, we love Chick-fil-A and can't go there. Like, we just can't stomach it anymore. And we were talking about how it's so effective for us. I mean, maybe Chick-fil-A doesn't give a shit that they don't get our 10, 15 or whatever when we go in there for sandwiches, but it's effective for us, especially as heterosexual cis people, to do that small protest, that small act of resistance. Not only because, like, I don't want to support that company, but every time we drive by one and think like, oh, I love those chicken sandwiches, I'm not doing it. It also gives me a moment to reflect on the LGBTQ community and think about, what they're going through that I'm not going through. So for those of you out there, if you don't vote with your dollar, you should start thinking about that. It's a good idea.
Made a post about Chick-fil-A, which I don't post very often, right? And it was pretty long, and it was essentially friends and family. If your craving is so strong that you're willing to put my life on the line and the life of queer people on the line for a waffle fry, then you have an issue. No craving should ever validate somebody's life. But on a side note, my spouse and I just went to Cracker Barrel for the first time in years. I'm not really that person, but they just stood up against a right-wing religious group who said he wanted to kill gay people, and they were going to have this huge event at one of the Cracker Barrels, and Cracker Barrel said, no. Said, you can believe what you want, but you can't say you're going to kill people. Like, no. Yeah. So we went to Cracker Barrel the next day for breakfast. I was like, all right, let's give them some money.
I was really impressed because their history is not good. And that's why I as well haven't been there in ages. But I saw that and I was like, okay, like, this is an opportunity for me to give you another opportunity and see where you as a business, as a culture have grown.
And I feel like queerness is such a unique issue, right? Because people can say, I don't agree with it. Okay, do you not agree with the moon? Like, I mean, it exists, right? And your limitation of exclusion only goes so far as it impacts my life. So you can sit at the table across from me and eat your food and not like me, but the moment you start limiting my access to things and limiting my safety, at that point, there's an issue. So when businesses are willing to stand up and say, we want everybody, but we really mean everybody, and not people who are going to threaten to kill other customers. I mean, I feel like that was the least they could do.
Right. I want to talk a little bit about the root causes of some of that hate. I think maybe this is true in academic circles and in kind of more well-read circles. I don't know if it's common knowledge elsewhere, but my understanding of homophobia and where it comes from is that it's rooted in misogyny. Can we talk about, like, from your perspectives, where does this hate come from? Where does it originate from? And then we can get to what do we do about it? How do we dismantle it?
It's interesting because for me, the hate is like 3 times as strong because I am a person of color. So I get the racist hate and I get the queer hate. And I feel like that hatred comes from a place of like not being able to be true to who you are. So you have to kind of conceal and mask it. And the best way to do that is hate everything that you can't be out loud. So there's a lot of people that push that hatred onto you, and I feel a lot of hatred a lot of times from a lot of cis white people because when they see me, they know that I'm not completely white. And they feel like, okay, one of our people went and slept with a black person. Oh my God, now we have to hate you, but we can't hate you because half of you belongs to us, so they don't know what to do. And I always find it interesting because the dynamic is always so strong. Some people can see it, some people can't, and some people treat me a certain way and some people don't. And then when they see the masculine presenting, then I get the treatment off top just because of that. So you could give a shit at this point what my color is. Now it's, you look like a man, you're huge. Now I really don't like you, and I really hate you even more. So I don't want you to live, I don't want you to breathe, I don't want you to be in my presence. And a lot of that comes from self-hate. I can't be with that black woman because it's so wrong, I'm white, or I can't be gay because everybody in my family laughs at the gay people and call everyone queers and, you know, every other name under the sun. Like, I've seen that battle of someone that wants to hate, but they can't. And then you see them doing things that they know they shouldn't behind closed doors because it's okay, no one knows about it. The minute someone knows about it out in the open, it's like, no. And it's all the things under the sun that could dismantle everything in their life, and they would rather choose the lie over the truth any day of the week because it protects them. The lie will always protect you in the end, and it's sad because once that lie is exposed, you're not protected anymore. Everything in your life just comes crumbling down, and the self-hate was for what? All of the hate was for what? Because now you need those people that you hated so much. The ones that you tore down, you need them to ally for you. You need them to protect you. And it's like, how can I protect someone who hated so much and fought to hate so much?
I'm going to go back to your power of language for a second. I've been working really hard lately not to say homophobia or homophobic, right? Because it places the onus not on the person doing the hate. Like, it's this innate fear of something. You're not scared of me, you're an asshole. Like, let's just get over it. And then it also devalues people with legitimate mental phobias, right? With legitimate psychological concerns. So I prefer heterosexist, right? The same way that puts the onus on you. You think being straight is better. And I know a lot of heterosexists who are not homophobic, right? They're like, oh, you're totally okay. I'm still better. I'm still better. I'm still the normal, and you're, oh, it's really cool. Yeah, I want to go to your parade with you. Yeah, I want to go do all this cool stuff. Yeah, I want to go to the bar with you. I'm still normal and better, and you can have your little piece of the cake. And I think a lot of heterosexist folks, as a general rule, really believe that if we take something from them, then it's like a cake, and a piece of their liberty disappears. Right? Instead of like the Buddhist saying of candles, right? Like, we can light the fire of everybody and everybody win. I'm not a competitive person, and I joke about that a lot because I think everyone should be able to win. I don't necessarily think that there needs to be a hierarchy. So heterosexist folks, as a general rule, refuse to see new insight, right? I was taught Pluto was a planet. Now I know it's a star. Like, okay, I learned new knowledge. I'm moving on. And I feel like a lot of folks aren't willing to move on from that. And they hold on to this idea, or they blame so much of what they're seeing in family discourse and other things on the queer community, right? So they're like, oh, I knew this one person who cheated on their wife because they were gay, down with the gays. Well, if this person could have come out when they were a teenager and been their authentic selves and never gotten in a heterosexual marriage and all of these other things. And then my last point on that is going to be media. I think a lot of heteronormative individuals really rely on media for the representation of queer individuals, and we look great on TV. We look rich and happy and half naked and abs, and y'all, I'm not that rich. I still look good, but I'm a little chubby, right? Like that's not my life. So a lot of the representations we have are just not authentic representations. They think that we're all holding parades every day instead of writing papers and gardening and paying bills.
I'm going to translate it into a little bit of transphobia, and I think where that stems from is fragile masculinity. There's a reason that I, as a very passing trans man, my safety is really compromised a very, very small amount of the time. I've been super fortunate to physically transition how I wish within a reasonable amount of time, so that I do, pass as a cis person, and so my safety now is very, very rarely compromised. I keep my identity very close to my heart. I share it with who I choose, and that's very few people. And when you look at the safety of trans men as compared to trans women, you see a stark contrast. Trans women don't have that opportunity, even when they do transition medically how they choose, surgically how they choose, or if they don't choose to at all, their safety is always going to be compromised no matter what. And that comes down to, one, the cis heteronormative community can't understand why a biologically born male would give up their male privilege to present as a woman. it's a mind-blowing concept because privilege is, the ultimate. Also comes down to, let's take for example, trans women, especially trans women of color, are usually killed by people who go to have a sexual encounter with them and find out they're trans women. And it's such a mind-blowing concept that people are so stuck to the binary of sexuality that anything in between it's beyond their comprehension. They fail to even try to comprehend. And then they bring sexuality and gender identity into one when they're actually two completely different things, completely independent of one another. They both are mind-blowingly fluid. But fragile masculinity is really where we see transphobia stemming from, and just that fear that cis heteronormative men could ever be attracted to a quote unquote man, because our society refuses to acknowledge trans women as women, period, end of story, end of the conversation. Trans men, there's not a question. Like, I'm never questioned about my masculinity because I've been raised from having no privilege to having privilege. And so obviously chasing privilege, like, my voice deepened, my body changed to align with the male anatomy. That's never questioned. But to give up your privilege and to have someone who's a biological male attracted to you is immediately a situation that's dangerous.
I'm going to trouble that just as a feminist take, right? So the idea that it is much harder to be read as a woman than a man, right? Just the laws that are put on women, cis women, trans women, everything, and this is what a woman looks like, right? So do you have your eyebrows, do you have your hair, do you have your nails, do you have that? And there's a lot of research done from a trans scholar who was assigned female at birth and transitioned later to male, and his argument essentially was, as a cis woman at the time, I could look like a man simply rolling out of bed. But this person has friends who are trans women and put hours and hours and hours of work into being read as a woman and are still not, because society as a whole has these parameters for what women should look like. And a lot of the arguments for trans women of color being murdered is, like you said, that they didn't reveal to me that they were a man. And while there's a lot of underlining issues between the idea of they didn't tell me they were quote unquote this or a lot of them do. A lot of them reveal it. Some people, they meet in queer clubs. Like, part of it is a fetish, right? Or they're closeted, and once they have a sexual relation, then they have to face this about themselves. They are these closeted queer people. So I think it goes back to just youth. Again, going back to the idea that this 13 or 14-year-old could safely say, hey, I think I might not be heteronormative, and what it looks like if we really were in a world where people could actually have those conversations.
And understand that you don't have to pick one or the other. Like, so you were a cis dude who ran into a trans woman in a gay club. One, shocker, trans people are in gay clubs. Two, of course you're going to find this person attractive. Like, trans women aren't these 6'7", bulky, hairy, macho individuals that the cis heteronormative community sometimes plays them out to be. They're smoking hot attractive. Trans people are attractive. That's a mind-blowing concept. There's a magazine that last year posted, I think, 15 or 20 different photos of trans men without disclosing they were trans men. And then whenever they came back the next issue and disclosed it, they some absurd backlash from this. How come you didn't tell us? I was attracted to this person, or da-da-da. It's not something we have to disclose. We never, ever, 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 ever have to disclose that we are trans. Does it make it easier when a sexual encounter is about to occur? Absolutely. I'm getting married next year to a woman who identifies as a cisgender heteronormative woman, and I made the decision when we started dating to tell her up front, hey, I'm a trans individual. This is my sexual history. This is my gender history. Simply as it was easier for me, and I wanted to know I was safe. It was never about her. It's always about me, and that is completely okay. That is when and why trans people disclose they're trans. It's about us when we're comfortable. The rest of the society is just gonna have to suck it up and deal with it.
That's awesome. I'm curious to know, what do you guys think are the biggest misconceptions that the heteronormative world has about the queer community?
I'm gonna do the simple, easy one, that it was a choice, right? So I'm gonna say like the non. Why would you choose that?
Yeah, the choice.
It's always my favorite. Or you're living that lifestyle. Like the way put glitter on every morning. Well, I wouldn't, because I would have to put on my flannel. I put on my flannel and tool belt every morning and fix stuff.
The line of this is what you're supposed to look like as a man, this is supposed to look like as a woman, they look at you and they're like, oh, well, you're not really a man because you have such long hair and you don't have much facial hair. That's because I like my long hair. If I didn't have any hair, I would look stupid. And I don't like facial hair because it gets caught in my shirt when I'm working. So there's that part. And I don't have to explain to you as to why that is that. And a lot of people are not okay with you just saying this is me and I don't have to explain it because they want an explanation. Why do you look like that? Why did you choose to do the choice? Why are you doing this again? They want to know your reason, and I feel like having to walk around with this validation of explanations and the conversations, it's unnecessary. Like you said, it's a choice. I choose to do this if I want to. If I didn't want to, I don't have to. There shouldn't be a backlash or some type of consequence for me not choosing to live a life that you don't seem to think is normal or that you would choose. Just because I don't choose to, marry a white woman and live this normal lesbo life that you think that I'm supposed to have, that doesn't mean that I'm less of a person, less of a gay person, less of a human on this planet. So being queer and choosing to live a lifestyle is something that blows the heteronormative mind, and they're like, I don't understand, I don't get it. Why? You need therapy.
It's so interesting. As you were saying that, I was thinking about the fact that Americans are obsessed with privacy. They're obsessed with like, this is my personal space. Like if you go anywhere else in the world, they don't require so much room between each other, right? Yeah. What is that disconnect between like, this is my stuff, this is my space, I deserve privacy. You don't. I need to know. I need to understand what's going on there. I need to understand your body and your mindset and why you're doing this. Where is that coming from? Where is that disconnect happening?
People are sexual perverts.
Yeah.
The intrigue is so huge. The intrigue is, they want to know why you don't have, as a trans man, they want to know why you don't have a penis but you don't have a chest. Like they want to see the scars. They want to magnify it. And you don't do that. And I think a lot of that comes from some trans men, they do their maniversary, and I'm completely supportive of that. And a lot of it is I want to show off my scars, I want to show off where I came from, I want to show off my journey. But then some Americans feel like, okay, because you did that, now I want to see everyone do that. Mm-hmm. Everyone show me their scars. Everyone show me your surgery process. I want to see it all. And there's no balance between like, okay, that's wonderful, you want to expose your journey and like have everyone see it so that people like you can understand that this is normal. There's so many people that go through this, and you have the others that are freaked out but like so obsessed with it that they constantly watch it, they constantly want to be a part of it, fetishized, and it's just turned into this like freak show. And that's where the whole switch around becomes, we're now freaks. And that's been the history of queers, is we're freaks, and they love it.
It's an entitlement. Like they feel entitled to know about your journey. Like, so when I initially came out, I was very, very open because I didn't know trans people. So I felt like, okay, well, I have that responsibility. So it's, later on in my life, it's a very, very, very small part of my life now. And so I don't really talk about it. I live a pretty stealth life, meaning that I don't care to disclose it. And I got a lot of backlash when I chose to pull those reins in. And how dare you not tell people? How dare you not post pictures? How dare you not do this? And it was like, you do it once and people feel an entitlement to your information at that point, and then they blame you while saying, well, you did it first. But I also make that choice every single time I either post a picture without a shirt on, or I post my anniversary, or whatever I choose to do. Like, that's my choice. You're not entitled to that information at any point.
Well, like Erin, I've known you for a few years now, and I mean, you are with child.
I sure am.
And you've disclosed that you're cis, but I also know uterine transplants are now a thing, right? But I've never asked you what's between your legs.
Yeah.
I have actually, I'm cis and I present as femme, but I've had numerous people ask me, just over the years, like just really simple questions, or curious about how you would sleep with your spouse. I figured out how straight people sleep together. And I know not all straight people sleep together the same way. Like, I know that too, right? And not all trans people, not all queer people, not all gay people. Some people don't even have sex, right? So it's fascinating, this perverted insight into what's happening, because I am really boring.
But yet mixed with so much of a prude attitude.
Yes.
That's the kicker.
It's like, you discussed me. What's in your pants?
Basically.
You discussed me. Toys? What do you have them? What kind of toys? Where do you buy them? Can I go with you when you buy them? If you buy them, it's amazing. I would never ask to go to somebody's gynecological appointment with them, but somehow the idea of what I'm doing in my bedroom becomes open access. No pun intended there, but it is really interesting. We are obsessed with sex, but I think the bottom line there is that we are in a very prudish society, right? Other countries are very much like,
but is that why, right? Like, we're obsessed
Yes.
because we're taught that, like, the body is shameful and sex is shameful.
Absolutely.
And the patriarchy is strong, and even in the queer community. So I'm gonna call out my cis gay male friends for a second, right? So even when you cross the divide of heteronormativity, cis men still rule the queer world. So when you see it on TV and you see 8-pack abs, can you get 8-packs? I swear they're 8-packs and little shorts and glitter. It's a very sexual setting. But I'm going to say you get any men together in a big group. I'm going to play the sexist card there. Maybe it's just a very sexual, safe space. And I wonder if that just kind of infiltrates down to everybody. That the assumption is that everyone's sleeping with everyone, and that's why we're doing this queer thing. Because married people don't sleep together all the time.
Talking about that 8, 12, 14 pack they always
Can you
hang
get a
on.
14?
I think so. You can buy it. It's on Amazon. So shout out to Netflix for making, and the name escapes me, but this last year they made one of the best series I've ever seen. It was about a gay cisgender white individual who had cerebral palsy.
Oh, that's a good
And
show.
there was an episode that I openly wept because they portrayed a sexual encounter with a hired escort and his journey as a disabled individual having a sexual encounter. And it was open and it was honest and it was one of the most touching, heart-wrenching things I've ever seen, because it was being asked, well, how do you like to be touched? Where do you like to be touched? How do I work with your body? And it was everything that I think our society needed in that one scene of open, honest, asking consent, and not treating his disabled gay body as this thing that should never be touched.
Exactly.
Are there, on the subject of representation in media, are there certain shows, movies, books that you wish people were reading and paying attention to or watching? And do you see representation done well? Do you see it done poorly? And I wish people would stay away from that or stop thinking that that's all us.
Porn is not real.
No, I beg to see representation, and I buy into the super cheesy stuff. I think I probably watched L Word all seasons 4 times because I have nothing. And the time you're the token queer person, or they're not authentic, or they're both these 6 foot tall supermodels that are all I'm rich and fabulous and we're married. And I don't think there's very much authentic representation that's mass produced that would be
I have one
consumed
show
by.
that I passionately love that I think nailed it. Schitt's Creek. David's journey throughout that entire show, his sexuality has never ever been the plot line, and in every interview that they discuss that with him, he said, no, I refuse to allow that to be a plot line of this show. It's an afterthought. I happen to be a pansexual individual in this show, and it's really just a beautiful thing to see that it's the only show I've ever watched that it wasn't the main line of its character.
I was watching Jessica Jones. Have you guys watched the 3rd season yet?
I haven't watched the first season.
It's a great show. I'm a big comic book person. I love it. But one of the things I love about the 3rd season, and I won't do any spoilers, but they have a pretty famous trans activist as they hired her, to be an actor. She is an actor, but she is phenomenal. She's a trans woman of color. And it never comes up in the plotline, ever. Her sexuality, her race, nothing. She's just a fantastic actor who's in this show. Done. And it's such a simple thing, but when I saw that, I was like, man, have I ever seen that?
I think that's what a lot of it is too. You were saying, hey, not to be the plot, but to just exist. It's so rarely that you could see us existing. I think about a year ago, I walked by the TV and my 5-year-old was watching it. Was like, they have two mommies like me, and it was like a Maytag commercial. It was for a refrigerator or something, and he was so excited, and he wanted to rewind it and watch it again. And I don't think I caught it, but I think maybe about 2 years ago I started noticing these businesses dropping the gay couple in for like 2 seconds and then going past them really quickly. And they were never holding hands, even though the straight couples were holding hands or other stuff like that. But no, I don't think that we're ever going to be equitably represented without making it the line, because then how would you make it the line without making it the line?
Well, there was that one show that was on a few years ago, The New Normal, and Nene Weeks was on there, and it shows the gay couple that wanted to have a kid, so they had a surrogate, and it was on for one season, and poof, it was gone. No mention of it like being pulled off the air, but it was because of, there was one episode where they were talking about breastfeeding in public, and one of the dads had like a makeshift breastplate thing on, and the whole entire female community just lost it. The entire white cisgender female community just like, that is not appropriate, that has to go, it's gotta go, we don't want to see that, that's so disrespectful. And it was done. The show just disappeared, never talked about again.
I think that goes into the same line of like TERFs, right? You have these cis women who feel incredibly entitled to their ownership of their body, right? And I mean, I try to keep up with the arguments so I at least have some valid counter protest, but what I hear mostly is men want to be women so they can rape me, is usually what the bottom line is.
Yeah.
They want to do it so when they go to prison they don't have to be with tough men. I was like, dude, who are you hanging out with that they know they're going to prison next week and they need to start their gender reassignment surgery now so that they can like a lot of it is essentially they're trying to take more rights from me instead of understanding that as a general rule the queer community is more marginalized than women as an overall encompassing sex or gender.
I want to pivot a little bit and start talking about legal protections and what is on the books versus what's not. I was doing some research before this show about looking specifically at Texas, just because that's where we all are. That's what we're living in. And I was surprised by the amount of protections that are on the books. I think I expected there to be fewer. There's certainly not enough, but because I work in education, I have always been under the impression and thought that in the state of Texas, you can be fired for being gay and a teacher, or queer in any sense, and being a teacher. And that's true in a lot of the state. I don't know if everybody knows that, but in the vast majority of the state, if you come out, or if the district decides to hold it against you, they can fire you. Where that's not true is in Houston, Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, and one other, but it's just a handful of districts that have protections in place. There are a lot of cities and counties with protections in place for government workers and government contractors. Very few protections throughout the state for any private employment. I'm curious to know what your experiences have been with the legal system, if you've witnessed, whether in your own life or just in your community, the types of discrimination that we hear about in the news, but that I think a lot of people, it's very easy for them to skim past. Your experiences with maybe fighting against that sort of discrimination, anything kind of on the legal side of things, if we could just pivot that direction.
So it's interesting coming here from Illinois and being here in Texas where there's minimal protection. And Illinois is one of the 21 states that actually has full protection everywhere in the state. So leaving Chicago to come here is like I left all my safety behind, and now I'm here trying to figure out, I don't know the legal system, I don't know the police here, I don't know any of that. So to try to navigate through that is I'm very cautious about that because of so many factors against me. I'm trans masculine and a person of color. So those are two things that I have against me that immediately once I'm seen, I am considered a threat, I'm considered a problem, a nuisance, and I'll be lucky if I get one that actually misgenders me and it's like, oh, that's a woman, they're not gonna do anything to me. So it's weird being here, and some people are very much okay with my masculine presenting appearance, and others are, you're a woman, so I don't care, and they just overlook. And it's weird because as much protection as there is in Chicago, I felt the most backlash in Chicago working in certain industries and being in certain sides of town where if you are queer and if you are trans, awesome, that's great. But you're a person of color and you're queer and trans on this side of town, no. You gotta go back to your side of town, south side, west side, wherever they assume that you're from, because most of those people of color don't live where they live because they can't afford it, or they don't have the social standings, or this, so then that becomes a problem. And that's when people want to call the police, or they want to get a restraining order because you're too close and they feel like you're a threat, but there is no threat. And it's just becomes this big, and I haven't had that many problems here. So the parallel is so weird to go from so much protection, but yet so much bullshit, to hear lack of protection, and yet no one gives a shit what I do, how I look, and no one says anything to me. So I'm kind of I'm shocked, almost kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop for a moment when that is compelled and put on the line, and just kind of see how that goes, because it's in Chicago, you don't expect, because it is a melting pot. There's interracial couples everywhere, and there's every race that you can find, so many different neighborhoods that have so much different food, but it's like, that's great. Well, the rest of it is so, like, they don't want to touch it, so it's all surface. So it's all for the look of it, and everything else underneath is like either swept under the rug, or they just come with a paddy wagon and they just round up every gay person they can see on the block, and they just put them in jail for no reason. They'll make up things, and here again, I could throw a cigarette somewhere and it could be illegal, and they don't care. They're not looking at me. They don't want to see. They don't care. So bizarre. Like, I'm in the Twilight Zone almost.
For me, it's multifaceted, and I'm going to play devil's advocate for like 2 quick seconds. So my undergraduate and my career choice was education. I was a teacher, a classroom teacher, elementary school. And anytime you deal with children and the idea of queerness, it becomes very personal to parents, and I get that. I was working in a district that had no protections in the state of Texas, in a very small town. So administrators kind of have their hands tied at a certain level if there's no legal protection. So being told through my entire undergraduate during mock interviews and fake interviews, they'd ask about something which they're legally not supposed to ask, but they would ask anyway, like, tell me about your husband. Oh, my wife. And they'd be like, oh no, you need to lie. You need to not say that. You need to avoid the question. And then in the classroom, I chose to leave the classroom because I was told more than once, in not so many different ways, that if I came out or told my students who I was, parents would be angry, and that would cycle, and eventually I'd find myself at the worst school or no job. And while it was never said at once, it was said in small steps over the years. But the problem was, I was a teacher in a very small district. My child came to my school and told everyone I have 2 moms. My wife was a teacher in the same district. We have the same last name, because I was all like, I'm going to be old-fashioned and take her name. So yes, I didn't lose my job, but I couldn't be out. And my level of outness would have literally been, my wife and I went to the zoo this weekend, which every heteronormative teacher does. Their husbands drop off lunch. I'm saying husbands because, all teachers are women. Drop off lunch and give them a kiss. Oh, and pregnant teachers, guess how that baby got in there? But the moment I tell anybody I'm shoving sex down these kids' throats and they're too young, well, I had a trans student. I'm pretty sure they were trans. And I found out later, a couple years later, yes, they came out as trans. I had a couple students I assume were queer, and yes, I've seen them years later, and they were. What it would have looked like for them to have an elementary school teacher who was super boring and went to bed at 9 o'clock and paid their taxes and was like, oh, look, you're normal and not a freak, and look how boring you could be, and have a job. So yes, I lost my job, loosely.
Most of my issues have actually been more with the education system. So I go to university here, and even when I changed my name legally and changed my gender legally, it has been a multiple year uphill battle to have the university recognize that. My transcripts still are in my dead name. It was 2 years after my name and gender marker changed, and they almost printed my diplomas, multiple diplomas, with the wrong name. It took fighting with multiple administrators in my corner to get them to change my email address so that it didn't have my dead name. I made the decision to also attend grad school at the same university. So I'm still dealing with, that's 3 years ago that was completed. I'm still dealing with some of my accounts showing my dead name, and it's been very frustrating because there's other universities that are extremely conservative that provide significantly easier access to changing these things. So it's been a trying time. I had a job here that was a part-time job through college where when I decided to start medically transitioning, I was told I was no longer allowed to use the restroom there at work. These are 10, 12-hour shifts working outside, so I was told I had to clock out, drive down the road to a gas station, use the restroom, and then come back to work if that's what I wanted to do, or have a doctor sign a note saying I had a medical abnormality. So for me, that was the point that I chose to leave that job, and I went to work at Starbucks for a really long time because it's an inclusive community that provided much needed medical care, paid leave to take care of top surgery and things like that. So that was really my big run-in with legalities here. The name and gender marker change situation in Texas is really reserved for those with money, those with means. So, I mean, I'm a college kid, still on a college kid salary, so I chose to try and battle the legal system myself, and it took about 6 months of paperwork and driving down to Austin. Got to Austin, it was done in 15 minutes. They didn't even care. They were like, okay, cool. They're like, here, sign this income waiver and we'll do it for free. Dallas, judges won't really see you without an attorney, and the one that's most known, well in use, is a trans woman who charges $1,300, which to me feels highly unethical that you understand the situation, you're making a profit off of a poor community. So I chose not to give her my business. I chose to do it myself. In Tarrant County, they will not do it. They just outright will not do it. So you really have to have the means and the privilege to drive somewhere like Austin or pay, several $1,000s. And it's a classist system. It's very difficult.
Wow. So as we wrap up and kind of before we get to kind of our big call to action and what our listeners can kind of start doing, what do you guys see as right now the biggest threat to the LGBTQ community? And what are the biggest opportunities you're seeing for change, for affecting actual change?
I think the biggest threat we face right now are what I call these ninja moves, right? I feel like our political administration right now is keeping us so busy with so many things that a lot of legal guidelines, a lot of removal of rights kind of slip through the cracks. It's such a hot mess, I can barely keep up. And then all of a sudden something passes and you have no idea it was even up for grabs, right? So like even basic bathroom bills and actually seeing things removed, I was naively optimistic. I was like, oh, we have rights. And trans servicemen and men and women and trans service people can serve, and you're taking these. So if you take this, what's next to take? Okay, my marriage, cool, and now what? Then this. And how far back can we go? Can we go back to like love? Can we start stopping interracial marriage? Like how far back can the administration actually go? I really naively thought this went through. We had a few years, we're solid. But I really think the biggest call to action is our cis and heteronormative folks. And then for me, obviously, I acknowledge my privilege everywhere I go, and I really try to clear the platform for people with lived experiences under those umbrellas. But even people like you, you're straight, you're cis, you're white, and you're anti-heterosexist, you're anti-white supremacy. And I'm gonna call you out, like, you're having a child, period. Not a boy, not a girl, you're having a human. And I'm having a human, and what that means for people, right? Like, it's not even strange that people aren't coming up and asking you, and I don't know if you do, what are you having? Do you tell them I'm having a human and call these straight people on it? Because I feel like when you're in the bubble, that reaction is so authentic, and I think that you can really help counter a lot of those homophobic, and I'm sorry, not homophobic, heterosexist rhetoric.
I think for me, it's a very hot button issue, and it's going to bother a lot of people. Gender reveal parties. Why do they exist? Why are the cis heteronormative community so obsessed with the genitals of an infant? Because
couldn't agree more.
The minute you have a quote unquote gender reveal, which it's not, it's a sex reveal, because gender and sex are wildly different. You put that child in a box and you limit them You're limiting whether or not they get trucks or they get dolls. You're limiting whether or not your friends buy them the shirt that says stud muffin or, you know, little princess. You've instantly determined that their entire life.
Yeah.
So they're going to go through school thinking, well, I'm a girl, so I'm not as smart at math, when actually women are freaking brilliant. Like, you look at women who coded, you know, for the first NASA mission. Like, I doubt her parents told her whole life, like, oh, you're pretty. Like, so gender reveal parties, yes, it is so awesome when you're having a kid and you want to give them everything and you're so excited and all these things, but how about we focus on like their mental stimulation and who they're going to be as a whole person outside of what their biological sex is, and let's take the focus off of that and more onto building quality individuals.
Love it.
Yeah, I feel like educating the ignorance is definitely going to be a big game changer. I feel like a lot of people just assume certain things about the community and the individuals and the letters that make up this entire thing. And I feel like educating some of the ignorance in that will help a lot of it. Like, there's a lot of people on Facebook that post a lot of stuff that I don't agree with, and you could just as easily delete them and remove them and block them. But what's the point of that? Because they're still not going to get it. They're still going to live and function the way that they have been ignorantly. And you do have a role in educating someone as to why we are the way that we are, why this community exists, why it's important to protect this community. Because there are children in your family that are a part of this community, but they cannot come out safely because you are so ignorant that they feel like even their own aunt, cousin, brother, mom, dad is going to kill them or disown them or stop loving them. So educating and not ignoring the ignorance is definitely something that we all need to take seriously and actually be active in it and consistently active in it. Because it's one thing to mention that a trans woman was killed and then 3 days later no one talks about it. It's not brought up, and there's no counseling for people that are affected by it. Just because I didn't know this woman that was killed does not mean that I'm not affected by it, because it could be me, it could be you, it could be someone that we know that ultimately is affected by this ignorant choice to not be educated that this woman is not a biological woman, and to have to stop on someone and say just because biologically they were not born a woman does not make them not. You know, we all have to do this as a community. To say it takes a village, it literally does. It takes an entire community, a village, to stop all of the poisonous and toxic ignorance that keeps making these rules and these laws okay to keep being passed or taken away.
I want to put in a plug for kind of a call to action for all the allies out there. If you are not familiar with it, 5calls.org is a fantastic website you should check out. I mean, everybody should check it out, but there are currently 2 different things available in there, and I'll put both of these on our website, which is wethepeoplepod.com. So there's currently a script up there for, well, let me back up. The whole point of 5 calls is to help you figure out who you're supposed to call and what you're supposed to say to them in order to affect change. So it uses your zip code and the issue that you're concerned about, and it tells you, like, this is a Senate issue, here's your senator's number, here's what you say to them. This is a local issue, here is, you know, your local people. But it's a fantastic resource. So 5calls.org. There's currently 2 scripts available, one for the Equality Act, if you're interested in seeing that passed, and then one to support transgender troops. So I really recommend, if you want to be a good ally, this is a really simple thing you can do. Literally, you go to the website, put in your zip code, click the button, and it says, here's the phone number. Here's what you're going to say when they pick up. It could not be easier. So I'll put those up along with all the other suggestions we've heard today on the website. I want to thank you guys for being here today. I know that it's a lot to just open yourself up and be vulnerable and talk about your lives and your community, so I want to thank you for that. Everybody who is watching or listening, feel free to tweet at us. If you have your own stories you want to share, you're welcome to do so. I would love to promote that for you. If you have questions for any of our panelists, you can put them on Twitter, and I will direct it to them. You can, again, find us on wethepeoplepod.com. All of our social media is linked on there. And lastly, we're going to be out next week because our studio is under construction. But the following week, We the People will dive into the human experience of immigration, deportation, and living with the fear of ICE, which we kind of heard a little bit about today, but we're going to dive into really deeply. And we're going to examine the crisis at our southern border, including the proliferation of concentration camps. So until then, stay safe but active. Remember that you are as responsible for change as anyone in a position of political power. Thank you guys so much.
Thank
Elizabeth
you.
is one of our panelists. You can put them on Twitter and we'll direct it to
Right.
them. Today's show was produced by me, Erin Goble Lynch. It was engineered by Kenny Woodfolk, and the music was written and produced by Josh Lowe.